Your love, already walking out there. Pinchas Levinson, political man of comedy.
Whoa! Well, we're going to rock tonight. Yo, very good. Thank you, David. Wow. Quite an introduction. Okay, great. Nice full house. Good to see you all here tonight. Glad you could make it. Here we are in the middle of Passover. You're all celebrating with the bread of affliction. You guys like this bread of affliction? I'm sorry, you gals? No, yeah. Yeah, none of us here are Matzo-chists, right? I mean, it's really, we wouldn't choose it if we didn't have to, right? We had a guy at our seder from Italy. He, of course, brought mozzarella cheese. But for the most part, you know, Passover is not really the funniest, right, of holidays, right? I mean, why is it that we have a Haggadah so that we can say the right words, right? You know, these are all the old jokes, and you know, it's we celebrate every year at my sister-in-law's. Where did you guys have your seder? Oh, your sisters. Okay, close enough, right? But we've had enough, you know, I don't know, we had young types, old types, but I don't think we're going back again next year. I think the night before the Seder, we're going to call up and say we can't come, my wife has a yeast infection, you know, that way we'll be able to beg off, you know. But, whatever, you do what you can, you know, and of course there was no knedlach at the Passover meal. It was scandalous, right? So we went out to eat afterwards, and the waiter comes over and I said to him, "Look, you have matzah balls?" And he says, "No, I always walk that way." Anyway, right, so, but Goldstone was big on the news recently. He, of course, apologized. You know the Goldstone report, right? So why did he apologize? So that he could get back into, show up at his Seder with his Aunt Bluma. I mean, it's clear that that's really the only reason he cared. And of course, we closed our Seder. I don't know how you guys closed your Seder, but we closed our Seder with B'Shana Haba'a B'Ikea Habenuya, right? You know, of course, we're all hoping that it'll get back. You know, we're hoping it'll get back. And I don't know, you know, Obama also had a Seder this year. He has a Seder last year, you know, and he had like the same Seder plate that we had. Okay, I don't know, it's pretty weird. And you know, so Obama has his Seder, right? And then Donald Trump says, "Well, I want to see your bar mitzvah certificate." You know, I mean, I don't know if you've been following this. They're just hounding Obama, right? You guys follow this? They're hounding him on his birth certificate thing. You know, it's kind of weird. It's kind of a fringe part of the Republican Party. Anyway, so recently the governor of Hawaii said, "Well, I met Obama when he was a few days old, right?" And how did they know it was Obama? Because he points to his diaper and he says, "Need to change," right? You know, that was the classic Obama line. And of course, yesterday was Earth Day. Did you guys celebrate Earth Day? Do you celebrate Earth Day? No? You didn't hug a tree? You know? Actually, there's a very, very famous tree here. I don't know how well you know Jerusalem, right? Not 20 steps from the doorway here. It goes back to King George's time. Anyway, you can go hug that tree. I've seen Californians hug it. You'll have a great time. I don't know, I can't take, I don't know, I guess you look like you take environmentalists more seriously than I do, but to me, they're just so serious and sanctimonious, you know. I don't know, you know, like, one match can destroy a forest, which in fact happened, but of course for me, I've got to waste a whole book just to get my barbecue going, you know, a whole box of matches, you know. You know, and these are the people like, right, in the 60s, right, they took acid to change the world, right, you know, because to make the world weird, right, and now, of course, they take Prozac to make the world understandable, you know, it's, whatever, people evolve, and I really think they should as well. We're here in the middle of the marathon season, right? I don't know if you guys have seen that. We had the Jerusalem Marathon about a month ago, right? And what was the claim to fame by the organizers was that no one got hurt by the Jerusalem light rail line, right? I mean, that's a big accomplishment in the cities of Jerusalem, huh? And then, of course, there was the Tel Aviv Marathon last week. And the first place person really was the one who got to upload his cross-line picture to Facebook, the first, right? This is the way you judge marathons now, really. I don't know, are you guys runners at all? No, okay, the wrong crowd, you know, runners, okay. Well, I have this friend who does marathons, right, you know, and he claims that he gets this runner's high after about, 40 kilometers, and, I drink and smoke, and after climbing a flight of stairs, I get the same effect, I mean, who's got to waste all that time trying to make it, somewhere else. Anyway, the doctor says to me, look, you should take up some jogging. So he said, you know, it'll make your life last longer. And I thought, you know, wow, I already feel 10 years older just at the thought of that. But no, I really do. I do run every morning. I get up and I start running before my brain has started figuring out what's going on, you know, because it's not the natural thing. But it's really not so bad, you know, apart from, of course, the heartbreak of toenail fungus and an occasional athlete's foot. But, you know, you wonder if runners get athlete's foot, right, do astronauts get mistletoe? You know, that's what we're running. But that's okay. No, they don't. I don't think they do. And then I think long walks are really good, especially if they're taken by people who annoy me, right? You know, sort of relatives, I'm happy when they go on long walks. And of course, it's not totally innocent, right? You know, my grandmother started walking at age 60. She started walking 8 kilometers a day, right? And of course, to this day, we haven't found, she's probably 115 walking somewhere. And then, of course, I was always struck by the adage, you know, that you should walk a mile in someone else's shoes before you criticize them, right? And there's a lot of wisdom in that because, first of all, by the time you criticize them, you're a mile away. And then secondly, of course, you have their shoes. So, you know, what could be worse than criticizing someone in that manner? Yeah. Okay, anyway, back to the political, right? We had a new Shabach head came in this week, Yoram Cohen, right? So, of course, the Western so-called intelligence agencies are checking him out, right? You know, so they type in Yoram Cohen into Google, of course, and up types like about 2,000 different things this guy has done, you know, so they're really quite impressed by what we Israelis can do with that. And we're having these new currencies coming out. I assume you're following this, right? There are going to be 4 artists on them, you know, Shaul Chernikovsky and Nathan Alterman and Leah Goldberg and Rachel Blosky. That's your civics lesson. So, of course, all 4 of them are Ashkenazi, right? Okay, the usual story. Okay, so then, of course, the Sephardim are claiming, well, you know, look at us. I mean, we are people who say cash only, you know. I mean, shouldn't we be on the bill? You look at artists like Kobe Peretz and Eyal Golan, right, who work only in cash for the, and of course they're with the tax authorities now. Shouldn't they be on the new bills? No, it doesn't look like it's going to work out that way. Okay, so in the end they came to a compromise, right? They'll put the Ashkenazim on the bills and they'll put the Sephardim on the coins. Oh, a usual kind of compromise here in Israel. And of course, Stanley Fisher, the Bank of Israel governor, he doesn't really look at bills like this, right? The only bills he looks at have U.S. presidents or European buildings on them. So he doesn't really care. And of course, this is tax time. I don't know if you guys fill out your taxes. I encourage you to do taxes. Well, the first observation, of course, is that anyone who says that a blank can't hurt you has obviously never filled out a tax form, right? Because this thing, it's blank, but it's not very friendly, right? And of course, Obama filled out his 2010 tax report, and he had $1.7 million in income and $14 million in expenses, right? 1.7 million in income and 14 trillion in expenses, right? You know. This is a guy who spent a lot of money. Okay, so he's going to go on Oprah's last show, right? Okay, that's going to be shortly. He's hoping to go on the show in which he gives away $14 trillion. Anyway, there's a new iPhone application that does your taxes, but of course, I don't know how your iPhone's working, but I wouldn't even trust my iPhone to make phone calls. It's certainly not going to get it near my taxes. And then, you know, it's a time of year when you get philosophical with your children because, of course, no child is so obnoxious and bratty that they can't be used as a tax deduction. So it's a good reason why you should. This is the time of year when you're grateful for your children. And then, of course, we have the MDs who are going to go on strike again next week, right? You know, they want a 50% increase in wage. I don't know, you know, it's hard to tell who are the bigger thieves in this country, right? The MDs or the MKs, right? Because the MKs, you know, the members of Knesset, they're basically on strike all year long and they get a whole salary. And you know, these doctors are on strike and they want a 50%. I don't know. I don't understand how they pay all these people all this money. Of course, we had Lieberman, the foreign minister. He's under possible indictment. And of course, all the Western liberals are just going gaga. You know, finally another Middle Eastern totalitarian dictator is about to bite the dust, okay? And of course, Bibi and all the other right-wing wannabes, of course, are just drooling over these connections that Lieberman has, right? You know, how come they never got anything like this, you know? And then, of course, Bibi's got his own sorrows with Bibi-gate, right? You know, it's the usual politician story. So, of course, Ehud Olmert looks at at his list of where Bibi stayed, and he says, "This is luxury hotel." You know, forget it. You know, it's nothing that he couldn't get. And then the survey came out by Forbes magazine this past week, a couple weeks ago, on happiness of people in different countries, right? Okay, so where do you think Israel ranked? Anybody know this? Israel ranked 8th. Okay, the U.S. was 14th, and the top countries, of course, were the Nordic countries, and number 1 was Denmark. Okay, I mean, look, the Danes are great, right? They give us Great Danes, but apart from that, it's hard to think, you know. I mean, like, I know one Dane, right, Hamlet, okay, and he spent his whole shtick as whether or not he should kill himself, you know. Whenever we came in 8th after that, not a very encouraging. And in France, of course, they just instituted this Burka law, right, you know, in which they outlawed this full coverage of Islamic women. You know, maybe there's 1,000 women like this in France, but of course the leader of this in her full garb says, you know, no one's taking this off of me. Read my lips, you know. Okay, but here we have, you know, I don't know. And here in Israel we also have what we call burkinis, right? These Arabic women who go bathing in these full clothed chadors, you know. If you go to the Jaffa Beach, you'll see them. Okay, so what happens? They take this black sheet and they throw it over their head, and then they cut out 2 little eyes and a little bit for the mouth, and they jump in the water, you know. And this is the Middle East bathing. Okay, and then you go up the road about, I don't know, 500 meters, and you wonder what happened to those 3 little pieces that they cut out of those women's sheets, and there they are, and all these Israeli women on our Brazilian beaches there. Whatever. It's a great place here in Israel. And of course, you know, it's not great being here during Pesach because you can barely drink anything civilized, right? Anyway, thank you very much. You've been a lovely audience. Pinchas Levinson, The Daily Slog.
Keep your hands going for